This is a quite big megalithic site, and it's been tampered with, restored and so on, mostly because of this road here. And the best part is we can go in and have a look here on the inside. And it's supposed to be a burial chamber, and it's been used for burial ceremonies throughout various time periods, and it's stated to be around 3,500 to 4,000 years old. But as we know with these places, it's quite hard to date them because you can't date stone, and you can always find fragments from various times and just give the date to the oldest piece of leather or chicken bones. So from this angle you can actually compare the view to a photograph from 1880 where there was no ceiling in the chamber. This is my first visit to this location, and it's a good chilly day. We have some snow. I asked my daughter to come along, but she wanted to play cat back home instead, so that's alright. Anyway, I was disappointed because the road is just next to this place, a meter and a half just from this wall here, and you can't bring along kids, you know, have a picnic nearby, tell stories, have them playing inside here and exploring the ancient site. So that was a bit disappointing. But just for the matter of it, here's a photograph from 1920s when a school class was visiting this site. And of course back then we didn't have the traffic that exists today. I think this place is sort of similar like the one in Jättakullen. Of course they have restored the roof here. In Jättakullen it's open, but one gets the idea at least of how it might have looked like. But that's something we'll never know, I guess. Here I'd like to show you that, for example, this area has old burial grounds. And this site is close to another one, which I've already made a video on. So what's happened, this area is located on an altitude. I mean, it's not super high up, but it's still like all those ancient megalithic sites here in Sweden. They're always located on places where you can have an overview, at least 180, like from the east to the west, or 360. So what happened is that you have these sites, and after Christianization there's a church built close to those sites. So all the traditions came to be focused on the church, the burial ceremonies, the worship and all that. If you look at this area, you can see many mounds like over there and far over there. I'm gonna go for a walk here and see how it looks. So just by standing on top of a burial mound and looking over the area, you can see more mounds over there. Let's see if I can zoom in a bit. Yeah, lots of smaller ones, and that's typical because this area used to be inhabited long ago, and it was on the way to the coast, so this was a path of communication and trade. Here's a megalithic site that's sort of intact, and this site has been tampered with. Actually on the info sign there it says that already in the 18th century pastor or the priest or the man who was in charge of the church and so on, they describe this site as having I mean countless burial sites, and if they weren't, they were sort of flattened out. So this area we see here, which I will go into, is not the only one. It was more vast and bigger. As you can see over there, for example, you have a field for crops. Here's another megalith. I've seen two so far, but there were probably many more. They might have been reused for construction, or they have fallen down and got buried over with earth, and you can see here this one has probably been taken back up from nearby, as it's reinforced to stand like this with the smaller stones. And these smaller stones are what's constructed those mounds. Just to show you how big this area is, there are the mounds, the many mounds, and behind them I parked my car, like 300 meters, and there was the first mound, and here comes a piece of forest, which I don't know how this place looked in ancient times, but you can see bigger mounds here. So I like what they have done here. They've actually made this as a accessible site where they have a path, and you can walk around the area and really have a good look at the whole site. Just by walking you can see many more. There was one over there, and here we have a big one. So I just imagine how this one must have looked in its original construction, made out of stones reinforced by something like wood, and I guess the trees were cleared out because this is like a private forest or something. It makes sense, right? You want to have something ritualistic, you want to bury your people, you want to live somewhere where the nature is harsh. You always want to do that at a place where you have a good overview. You don't want to sort of cuddle up somewhere in a deep forest. And that's what the people did here. And this area here, as I said, used to be a communication, one of the communication centers at that time, in which people from the middle of southern Sweden or from this area actually could just travel to the ocean. Here we have the typical donut shape once again, but this one is very big, so the center has collapsed long ago. Amazing, and a beautiful location. As I said, one has to think away the trees. Here you can actually see how it was designed and how it looked like. As I said, you see the stones there, and you can just imagine how the center on the top collapsed in and created that typical donut shape. Here we have a labyrinth which is located, okay, here I am, and it's located here. So I'm gonna go and try to get there today because yeah, it's a free day off, so let's go and have some nature walks. On my way I just had to film this church from the 13th century, and I can just put in some footage of another church which is not that far away, but it's in ruins, while this one has been maintained. And so you can see sort of how the one in ruins could have looked like. It wasn't easy to find this location because the sign is here, and to get here, well, it's really a labyrinth. But I was lucky, a man was standing outside of his house, and yeah, I asked him where he was, and he was so kind, so he escorted me here. So I drove behind him because he was going almost the same way. Kind people, small town people. For me, this isn't a labyrinth because you can see it's no fun. I don't think kids will see much fun in this because you can just cheat and it's not that complicated. It's more resembles a kind of rites of passage, you know, maybe from a kid who's supposed to become a teenager, and there's some ritual and they walk through this, or a line of contemplation as you walk around this place, or for marriage or something. And what's interesting is these can be found on the west coast of Sweden and in the northeast coast of Sweden. And as it's said in on the sign, these patterns can be found throughout time, geography, all the way from the Middle East to the Arctic. As you can see the text here, there are labyrinths from nearly all ages, and they have been found from the Arctic to the Middle East. Labyrinth traditions as well as labyrinth themselves can be seen as fragments of cultural identity that cut across time, geography and culture. I don't know what the purpose of this was, but it was interesting to just be outside in nature and have a kind of destination and find this place. I didn't know it existed, so it's something new for me, and I hope you enjoyed this. Take care and all the best. Ciao.